called this September, Jiminy Christmas, November 1st, 2022, Capital Improvement Plan Committee meeting to order. We'll start as always with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I know our first order of business is approval of minutes, but since we just got them to take a look at and we have a presenter, would anyone mind if we move the presenter up first so we could get that knocked out first before we go into that? Sure. Right. So the next will be presentation from requesters. Superintendent Todd Allen.
Thank you for having me. Actually, I also wanted to say thank you. I know there was some flexibility of the committee to move the school district later because we were not quite ready to meet your requests in terms of mapping out our plans. And so I do thank you for that flexibility. I did also want to just acknowledge how impressed I am with the town of Newmarket with the careful consideration that you give to many aspects of the budgeting and planning process. I mean, the budget committee and the capital improvement plan committee, I think those are just wonderful things, and I commend you all for being engaged in that. So thank you for having me. So I'll just run through these, and certainly I can take questions, and actually Phil can probably take questions because he's also on the school district capital improvement planning committee. The first project. And actually, I would acknowledge some of these you've seen before. But the first project actually is one that's been on the agenda for the school district for quite some time. It was part of the original plan in the renovation of the junior-senior high. Basically, it's the courtyard of the junior-senior high school. If any of you had the opportunity to go over it and get into the building since the renovation, you will notice that there is one part of the building that is most decidedly not complete, and that is it. And so this project has sort of been on the agenda for a few years now. In the past, we've kind of there's been a lot of debate about where the funds might come from, but I think we've now been able to identify the locations of the funds to pay for this project. Basically, the idea is to turn the courtyard into sort of an outdoor classroom space with a seating area for student use, but also tables for outdoor project work and that kind of thing. This picture on here really does not do it justice, so if you're trying to make it make sense to our layout, this is not a picture of our RC. We didn't actually have one that was set up that way. But basically the issue we're hoping to move forward, and actually the board gave us the green light back in late September to move forward with the planning of the project. We've identified three sources for the revenue to cover this. Total cost of the project is $350,000. We have a capital reserve trust fund specifically for enhancements and improvements of the school district, which we would withdraw $124,334. We have $160,000 that are left over from the bond that can only be used for improvements on the facility as part of the facility. So that's another secondary source. And then the third source is impact fees collected by the town, which again are used for school improvements, particularly those that might be brought about by enrollments and that kind of thing. So that's project number one. Any questions or things you wanted to add, Phil?
No, I think the important thing to note is that the bond is actually, it's money that can only be spent on this type of project for the expansion. So it's being used very clearly within the purpose, and there'd be very few other things we could do with that bond.
And I think it would be worth noting too that I just want to acknowledge the community's investment in the two schools. I mean, the $39 million authorized by the community to renovate both schools has really brought us to a point where we have exceptional facilities. And again, this is really one of the last pieces to bringing that facility up to a point where I think all parts of it we can be very proud of.
So I'm unclear as to what the capital reserve fund balance is for the school.
Oh, I can tell you that.
Yeah, well, I was able to ascertain. I'm not sure it was right. That was the question I was going to have, was 150,000, but I'm not sure that's right.
There are also multiple capital reserve funds in the school side.
Yeah, so the fund that we would be drawing from for this would be the School Improvement Capital Reserve Fund. And as of September 1, there were $530,659.14 in that account.
That's $530,659.14.
That is correct. So obviously, to draw it down by 124 would reduce that balance by 124,000.
All right, so this request is just to authorize the use of those funds from that capital.
Yes, and unlike the town side, anytime the school, correct me if I'm wrong here, raises or expends capital reserve, is the board agent to expend?
board is the agent
to
to
expend, but to raise anything, like, we can't just not hide it, sorry, that's it. We can't just put it into like the general, like how much we're appropriating. If we were gonna actually add money to that capital reserve fund, we have to go to the voters and say, here's the school budget, and here's another warrant article saying we wanna add money to this capital reserve
Right,
fund.
so our job then is just to vote on taking funds from existing capital reserve.
Yes.
Any other questions about that first project? Okay. The next one is actually a project you've heard about in the past. It's actually, this has been going on for a few years. It's some work done at the elementary school. Basically what we are doing is we have completed last year, they completed the upgrade of all the electrical functioning of the school, so that was completed last summer. Unfortunately, due to a number of issues, moving forward on the window replacement was delayed. Originally, we had hoped to replace half the windows last summer and then do the other half this coming summer. That did not happen. And actually, I did want to note in this form, we note that we had hoped to receive the $150,000 seed grant. We were notified early last week that we did not get that grant. So we are actually we'll have to go back to the drawing board as a system to figure out how we want to do it. I would say window replacement in the facility needs to be a high priority, and so we'll definitely take a look at some other possible sources of funds. One which you'll hear me talk about in a minute. We do have ESSER funding that we are using for another project that I believe we can also repurpose it for that. So, the idea was to do half the windows this next summer and then do the other half the following year.
What does SEED stand for?
It's it's through the Department of Ed. It's like secondary education, and it's one of those fancy acronyms that
I'll look it up, don't worry.
So this 103 would come from that same school improvement capital reserve?
So this would come from maintenance and repair capital reserve fund, and that fund currently has a balance of $639,523.79. So the 103.7 is intended to come from there. Again, because we didn't get the seed money, we have to have some conversation with the board as to whether we might shift things around, maybe take more from that fund, but I think that's a conversation for the board to have.
Would you still want to move forward with this request from this?
Yeah, I mean, the windows, there are definitely some that are, they're not very energy efficient, and so, yeah, we definitely want to move forward with it. I think we had determined we could do it in a 2-year cycle, and quite frankly, it would be challenging to do them all in 1 year anyway. So, yeah, I think we will want to move forward, but again, I haven't had a chance to talk about it with our board to determine how we might react. I literally found this out last Friday or something.
So if all you had was the 103, it wouldn't make sense to expend that money?
Well, I think there'd be you kind of lose some of the economy gained. Typically, contractors, they want to come in and do a substantial job. The more you break it up into multiple parts, I just don't know how much the cost of the overall project would go up. We had worked it out for basically over 2 years, and that made sense to the vendor we were working with. But again, we have to kind of retool this project before we can go forward. But I definitely think it's something we will want to do next summer.
The total cost of the electrical upgrade was $70,000.
The $75,200 has already been completed. So that was funded out of previous budgets. So what we're really talking about is splitting that $550,355 into 2 years, and the original idea was, like we said, $253,000 this summer, and the remaining balance the following year. Any other questions on that one? to, this is another project that you have heard about before. This is one of the things, when we did the renovations on the two buildings, it did not originally include replacing carpet and flooring in a number of classrooms. And so over the span of, I believe it's 3 years, we have been systematically removing the old carpeting in classrooms, replacing it with tile, and then purchasing area rugs that are easier to clean and keep clean so that the classrooms can still have a seating area for students there. But anyway, we have done all but 3 of the classrooms. And so this is built into our current operating budget, and the cost is $50,000 to finish that work. And I have been over at the elementary school, and the teachers who are looking forward to getting rid of the old carpet are thrilled that this is the year they get it.
So I'm sorry, quick question. So are you talking about putting in cubed carpeting or just tile?
Tile.
Just tile, okay.
So basically remove the carpet, replace with a tile floor that is easy to clean and much better from an allergy perspective. Mm-hmm. And then because in elementary classrooms there is often circle time and sitting on the floor, you need a space that is good for that. So basically an area rug that can be placed in the room where the teacher chooses to use it, where kids can gather and meet. But it's also something that from a cleaning standpoint, you can roll it up, send it off, and it can be deep cleaned very easily. Or frankly, they're relatively cheap to replace over time. Whereas when you have a wall-to-wall carpeting situation, it's just over time they get a lot of wear and tear.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So this is a budget item?
Yeah,
It
so
wouldn't be within our,
it's a facilities project, but it's not really a capital reserve committee, like yay or nay, because it's going into the raise and appropriate line.
Yes, certainly one of the things, and actually Phil and I have talked about this, is refining this process from the standpoint of what do we want to bring before you and what do you want to hear from us. So these were the projects that we had in the queue that we are working on. So some of them relate to capital reserve funds, some of them do not.
I think it's still good to have that information, just understand what your needs are. So,
Right.
thank you.
Yeah, and as I said, I think it's very impressive that we're trying to take a look at the big picture, because ultimately every dollar that the school district is collecting is out of the same pockets of the taxpayers in Newmarket. So I commend you guys for this. Any other thoughts or questions on that project?
I'm sure you're shocked that I'm talking about wanting to help get this more streamlined or long term.
Okay, the next project that's presented to you is the playground at the elementary school. If you are, if you're familiar with it at all, it's been an ongoing issue for quite some time. The PTA at the elementary school has been very actively involved in fundraising for it. The playground has kind of outlived its useful life, and it's laid out in a way that doesn't really match the current programming. And so what we're really looking at doing is basically replacing that entire playground and providing a much more useful play space for all the kids. So ultimately what we're hoping to accomplish is a replacement of all of the playground equipment with a focus on ADA compliance, and also making sure that there is a playground area there for our preschool age kids that is easy for the adults to supervise and so forth. And then on top of that, the grass field that is there is questionably useful most of the time, when particularly in the early stages of spring and so forth, and wanting to get that field to be in better shape, and then installing a court that will have basketball hoops on it that can be used for that. But kids love to do hopscotch, foursquare, jump rope, and that kind of thing. And particularly in the winter months, it will provide another place for kids to be outside and play. One of the very exciting parts of this project is the community has created a capital reserve fund and has contributed $50,000 over the last 3 years to it. So it currently has a balance of $150,000 specifically for this purpose. The PTA has been actively fundraising and has raised $40,000. And we discovered actually through the very detailed and meticulous work of Jenna Mellon, my business administrator, that ESSER funding can be utilized for playground upgrades because it connects to the social emotional well-being of our students, and that's one of the primary purposes of ESSER, is to promote health and so forth. And so we are actually able to fund the remaining balance out of that through ESSER funding. So there are no additional tax dollars required. The capital reserve fund would be tapped for the 150 that is currently there. And that project could be done next summer if God willing and supply chains and all those things line up.
So quick question, what's the life expectancy of a playground?
That's I don't know the exact answer. I will say that one of the things that certainly this particular playground, there's a lot of wear and tear on it. That's a lot of the parts, there's some rustiness there. But more importantly, I think the playground itself is not ADA compliant or handicapped accessible in any way, or in any significant way. And so basically what you see over there at this point, the kids are not playing on the playground that much. Most of what they're looking for is field space to play on and so forth. And so what we would be looking to do is to put elements there that are more in line with what kids will use, climbing features and things of that sort that seem to be very, very popular. But in terms of, I'd have to do research on that. But I would tell you, the architect that's working with us was very clear that ours has outlived its life, and it's.
I was just curious because it's the existing playground has met its life cycle expectancy. Yeah. So what is the life cycle expectancies? But you mentioned ADA, so.
Yeah, I think more. My understanding is the playground, the initial stages of its installation was in the late 90s, and one of the challenges with playgrounds is they often are the thing that PTA is often fundraised for, and they tend to be done piecemeal, so you don't have a comprehensive plan. And one of the things that this allows us to do is establish a comprehensive plan that meets all of the various components. I'm not saying all features of the playground are not useful anymore. It's just the design of it was not very carefully thought out. It was like, okay, we have money for this, let's put it in. And one of the features that was really problematic is all of the elements that are popular amongst the preschool kids are farther away from the preschool classroom, so supervision for the preschool teachers is challenging. And then it creates other issues out there. So I know I'm getting long-winded, but there's more to it than just the life cycle. It's also making it a useful place. And I would tell you, just from a community investment in our schools, I think I can't tell you how excited the PTA is to hear that we're looking at this project in a serious way, because it is something that kids and families will benefit from every day when there's a nice, useful playground over there.
Thank you.
So you're asking us to vote to apply the whole 150 that's been set aside,
Correct.
Right? Not 50.
Yeah. The 50 would be whether or not we would vote to add to this spring. So we still have to make some decisions on what monies we're going to put into the trust funds moving forward. So it's really a call for the board at that point.
But the plan, like when you look at the budget here, it's saying we would add 50 to that this year to complete the project. So the vote is for the 50.
So
50 to add to the capital reserve fund in order to get it to the place where it will cover the cost.
Right. So
that's not within our purview to add funds to the capital reserve.
we need to, because this is a conversation we'll be having in the next few meetings, is what the warrant will be and what we will be putting monies into. So presume one of the things we might decide to do is to put 50,000 more in this account, because we've done it each of the last 3 years. If there's 200,000 there, we would be using all of it to the playground.
So what we did with the town side was recommend, like, they would say, here's our plan for what we want to do, right? Like culvert work or whatever, right? And then it's like, this year we want to put 50K in, and we would, as I recall, we would vote for, we'll approve like this much money, like is going into that plan this year.
Right. So, yeah, so in that regard, yes.
So this vote would be for,
Take it.
to approve the 50K,
Yeah.
to say not approve, we don't have that authority over the school
recommend.
side, to recommend that the school raise and appropriates the 50K for that.
Is it 2 requests then? Like 1, raise the 50K, then 2 to spend it?
They don't come to us for expending authority, they come to us for raising and appropriating authority,
The school?
the town, like,
If town's different, this is the school though, right?
school, frankly, we have zero authority over the school, we do this as like if statutorily, like, there's no authority over like the school in this space.
Okay.
This has been like a collaborative experiment and experience, like to see how can we as a body see the totality of projects going on, like for example, this one, right? So if Amy came forward and said, we're gonna redo the entire playground at the rec space too, we'd be like, okay, as a community, like what is the priority of like playground work?
Okay. Just so, because I just got mixed message too, I just thought, when we were going through the other ones, we were here to approve those expenses, to use that capital reserve money. Like for instance, the first page, say the courtyard landscaping. So 124,334 of it is being requested to what? Be used or put in?
So I would say, when I look at that first one, I guess it's the way that these sheets are set up.
Right, that 124,000 would be withdrawn from the
Withdrawn.
existing fund.
So the sheets are being used
So-
in two different ways.
Right.
Yeah.
So with the town, we're voting.
Need different sheet.
The sheets are just broken.
Yep.
I think we're very well aware
Yeah, I know,
of that.
but for the school definitely too.
Yeah.
So with the town though, we're voting to either add funds to capital reserves or not,
Right.
based on what the request is, how much money they have. Like
Yes.
we looked at some and said, gosh, they have plenty of money there, why would they need more?
Yes.
When we vote to approve one, which is adding funds, then it's impact on the budget.
Yes.
It's a money that's going into a capital reserve fund. But here, we're not doing that.
So what I would say is we can't approve, because again, like we don't have statutory authority over the SAU, but what we can do is recommend.
It's the same thing with the town, we don't.
We don't approve, yeah,
It's not
they,
our
like, yeah.
call, we're making a-
But we can, so for anywhere where they're looking to, like, we want to raise and appropriate, those are the ones that I would say we vote on to say, like, to recommend or not. We don't really have authority over, like, the school saying, even if we did have statutory authority, saying that they wanted to, like, pull 124K out of the 530K to do the courtyard project. That's not ours.
Right.
Saying we want to raise and appropriate 50K of taxpayer money
Yeah.
to fund this, that's where we would have a
This
voice.
is the first one we vote on.
Is the first one we vote on, yes. I think the rest is contextual information around like what are the capital projects, as much as like we've been talking about like as a community, like how do we move from this to like plans that the budget then is an operationalization of? Like the school is also looking at that. And I think like we've had conversations with Dave, who's like I think the facilities director, I think is gonna, I know is on like a mission to a pretty comprehensive like move forward for like okay, how are we actually going to maintain these facilities that we've done this $39 million investment in?
Right. Which leads us right to the next two.
So just another quick thing, if I may. When we see, about the playgrounds, so thank you for that breakdown for me. But knowing what the Parks and Recreation Department are doing, and I know I hop on this every time we meet and I apologize, but we have to find a way to help direct needs, to help create leverage for costs. So, I mean, I'm all for it. But I think if there's any way that the Parks and Recreation and the school department can say, hey, I'm working with this guy, what guy are you working with? Maybe we can have them both work together. And I bring that up to your point about the supply chain. If you're fighting with the agent over here and then she's fighting with an agent over here, your power's diversified. You're better if we can pull it together, and that might help address some of the supply chain issues as well, besides obviously the pricing.
I agree with you, but do remember just like rec department, their whole thing that they hadn't figured out where the new playground was going to be, so they're not at this level of process.
Yeah, and I'm just using
I
that
agree with
strictly
your
as an
overall
example.
point, but like
Yep.
right now, yeah, I agree with your overall whole point, but just like it wouldn't have helped this situation, but it'll help in different situations.
Totally agree, yep.
I appreciate, as I say, this is my first time through with the process here in Newmarket, and I'm learning as I go.
Process is
so
going to
thank
change.
you. So any other questions on the playground project before we move on? I would note, by the way, one of the first things I did this summer was I met with Amy from the rec department, I met with Steve Fournier, and we actually did talk through some of these things. And certainly there's some big picture visioning that we kind of spitballed, but I think, to your point, there's no question, Newmarket's a small town. I mean, the primary fields that we share are the school district owns, the town maintains, so, no matter how you slice it, there's a collaboration there, and I think it's just, and it's a good one. I really think it's a very positive relationship. So the next project, when you start talking about capital proposal, this is very much in the category of a wish. This, I believe, was presented to you in previous years, so I don't believe I'm the first person to share this with you. But one of the things that has, in fact, one of my first conversations with Steve Fournier, we were just talking about, he was helping me learn what did the school district own, what did the town own, kind of some of these interesting arrangements. And we arrived on the idea of fields, and talking with Amy from the rec department, it's clear that there is a need for some other type of field space. So this I believe was originally proposed as a way to begin to address that. The concept, and again, this is very much in the wish stage. In fact, if you look at the commencement years, I'll probably be long gone before this occurs, but it's to begin to get us thinking in that term. The land across the street from the high school is owned by the district. Again, there's so much that needs to be done to study the land and understand it and determine if that's the right place for it. But the concept would be to have an artificial turf field over there that would be an all-weather turf that could be used for many of the athletic activities. So that's the concept. Again, it's very much in its early stages. Basically, what we've attempted to do is to think in terms of capital reserve funds, and with the idea of putting money in that starting in the 25-26 cycle to begin to build up a reserve to be able to do that project, hopefully by the early 2031 to school year. I would tell you, I have some experience in field development. When I was in Oyster River, we actually did 2 turf fields over there, so I can speak to the value of having it as a community. One of the first conversations I had, I was at a baseball game, and I had a group of track parents talking to me because they were trying to have there was a baseball game going on, and the track kids were running all around in between flying softballs and baseballs and trying to have their practice. And certainly the idea of putting a track around it was another component there. Obviously, these are big picture ideas that are pricey. However, a town like Newmarket, who has a lot of active kids, a lot of active adults, you could definitely see a value long term. And I know the rec department is always looking for ways to promote recreation.
I guess that's one of my questions. Would the school district be open to outside events like I don't know what you call it, like a adult softball league or adult flag football, something like that? Like it wouldn't interfere with school operations or school activities like in the summer.
That actually is one of the significant benefits to having a community facility that draws community members there. You can have other events there in the off hours. There certainly aren't enough school demands that would use it 24/7. Right. So absolutely, on weekends and so forth. One of the things that I was struck by, I was at the Epping Newmarket football game over in Epping last week, and I was talking with their athletic director, and I just said, if we ever have a nice field over here in Newmarket, could we host a homecoming game in Newmarket? Because we got half that team is Newmarket kids, and they were they're thrilled at the idea. Unfortunately, it's really not feasible given our current space, but if we did have it, events like that would be just really fun things to have, and I could certainly see community relays, community concerts, there's all kinds of wonderful things that can happen on it. But again, this is a long-range visioning kind of thing, and we're trying to get ourselves into the idea of mapping things out and saying, okay, when can this find its way into our priorities?
Yeah, it sounds like a great opportunity, in the future, having that dialogue with community members and what it would look like, you know.
And if anybody wins Powerball, I'm telling you,
We tried, I
I
tried.
tried last night.
I did too, we gotta keep trying.
Name a field after
The Powerball number.
Keep trying,
Yeah.
keep trying.
Rich looks like he has a question.
Yes, right.
Well, so if the town decided to want to do something like this is a warrant article that the town votes on?
So this would, the way it would, well, the way this is currently listed, it would be a warrant that we voted on. And in order, again, for, if it was gonna be a school warrant, it would have to be one that every year raise and appropriate to put
Right.
into it.
And that would get voted on at the deliberative
At
session?
the, well, at the second part, SB two, right? So the second, yeah,
Yeah.
the vote. We could discuss the deliberative and then vote it on.
Yeah, so your first year, you'd have a warrant to create the fund.
Is
and-
appropriate.
And request the appropriation of whatever that first dollar amount is. That establishes the fund, and then every year,
You add to it.
you add to
Request,
it.
yeah.
And the history in this district has been to use unexpended fund balances to not add to, so it's basically the money that is in the fund balance at the end of the year and contributing to it that way, so you're not asking for additional tax revenue, it's money that's already been collected. Okay. Again, that's a wish, and I would love to see it happen, but I recognize it's a distant item.
That's like not even a, it's a long-term ask, even in that, wouldn't even be looking at starting, asking to raise and appropriate for 2 fiscal years.
And then the next one actually kind of ties into something Phil was saying. One of the things Dave Riley, our facilities director, is beginning to do is to, Newmarket had long-standing facilities issues in the school district. We had, a grossly inadequate facility going back 6 or 7 years. We have now reached a point where as I said, we have exceptionally good facilities that are well-maintained. But what we haven't historically done is to try to map out a long-term, maintenance and upkeep schedule. And so what Dave Riley is attempting to do is to begin to map that out. So this one here is to basically get us in a cycle of putting away $100,000 every year to build up the capital reserve fund, with the idea that he's mapping out when the HVAC systems reach their life expectancy, and so we can actually anticipate that. So this is all part of that process. Again, so basically for this year, we're talking about putting $100,000 in a capital reserve fund to begin setting money aside for that purpose down the road.
So there's no formal reserve study that lays out what would need to be replaced and what lifespan, over time?
Dave, we work with Siemens, is one of the companies that we work with, and he's working with them to try to map out what the various components are. And in fact, one of the reasons why I don't have that in front of you is it is a fairly complex process to map out exactly what units and so forth. So are you asking, is there going to be a full facility study to determine those needs?
Well, the best way to justify this would be to do that sort of reserve study,
Sure.
which suggests, okay, my HVAC has a 15-year life expectancies, and I'm going to need, XYZ dollars in year 15,
Right.
but lays all that out so that you know how much is appropriate to be putting away, and what's the time frame of when you expect to replace stuff. So that's a study that
High value.
it would super support this kind of, appropriation.
Right. As I wish I had Dave Riley here with you, because he is actually deep in the weeds of this, and I think he could answer the question. But I take your point, well taken. A more comprehensive study might be helpful.
Because if this is just HVAC, then you're saying it cost $1 million and it's 10 years, it's life expectancy?
Well, this includes the roofs, HVAC, and any other building systems that might need to be replaced over time. I mean, I think it's where, in fact, again, this is a conversation we will be having at the board in terms of how we're using trust funds and how that is baked into the equation of ongoing upkeep and maintenance of buildings. I think historically, the mentality here in the school district anyway was to keep squirreling money away on the idea that at some point the building was going to have to be either redone or they were kind of planning for that sort of calamity that would result in a response. And now that the buildings are in a much better state, now we're kind of shifting to more of a long-range visioning.
Yeah.
But
Well, this is smart, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
this is the right thing to do. The question is, what's the right number?
Right.
And how many years?
It does, like, I think there has been a reactive mentality because it's always been like, we don't know when something's gonna go, right? So now I think it is a major shift to get to like, what you're talking about, proactively,
Yeah.
how much do we need to be saving each year in order to if you owned a house, right? Like the roof's gonna last this long, I know the chimney's gonna have to repair, the repointing this long. So yeah, I think that's the direction that the district's headed. I think we're just not there yet.
And I do think Dave Riley will be, he's planning to present to the board here in the near future with his preliminary thoughts before we make any decision on the warrant in terms of what we're asking to put in it.
Is this I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so, just full disclosure, I actually work for Siemens, so nice choice, but, I just wanna make sure that, like, as you're looking at this, you're looking at water, the envelope, and the power, right? You wanna be able to look at that, and when you look at the power, you wanna be looking at the lighting, because some of those replacement of the bulbs to LED can help pay for the cost, right? So, again, nice choice, and I had nothing to do with it. But I just wanna just bring that up as Dave's looking at it, look at the whole, caboodle, right? But the lighting can help pay for it.
Absolutely. Yeah, in fact, when I was at Oyster River High School, Siemens came in, great company, by the way.
It is now.
And we did a tremendous amount of work and actually cut the energy bills in half.
Yeah.
Simply by putting more controls on so that
Exactly.
things were only on when they needed to be on and they weren't on 24/7, which was historically what had
And
happened.
especially now, right, with the cost of power and all that, so,
Absolutely.
but just as long as they're looking at everything, I think that's wonderful.
Well, one of the things to keep in mind, and again, Dave Riley would be the best person to speak to this, but one of the aspects to the decision to renovate, you have to keep in mind that renovation is still on the core of the building is a 1924 building. And so there are things that we have to think about. So as you're talking about, water and all of those things, everything wasn't replaced in the renovation. So we definitely have to keep the bigger picture in mind. I mean, the Historical Society reminded me, or told me, that in 2024 we'll be celebrating the 100th anniversary of our high school. And so certainly it's important to keep that in mind. That's when the building was originally built.
Yeah, often you see that a reserve study is hiring a professional firm, like it's 10 or 15 grand or whatever it is, that they come in and they do that study for you and they tell you, to her point, every
does.
little thing.
I mean, it does beg the question, maybe we talk about this on Wednesday, beg the question of, would it make sense to budget for a reserve study, like, in collaboration with Dave, to be like, hey, like, let's look at this new facility and like, let's get a schedule of like replacement schedule, and then like, that's gonna really drive ultimately what like the right number is to go.
Right,
Yeah.
if it's a third party, it's not, it's a, unbiased third party that's coming and saying, hey, your roof's only gonna last for whatever, this is what's gonna happen, in the future.
I think that's good
A
advice.
full audit, a full audit.
I hear you. So I'll take that back and review that with Dave and Jana, and I think you made a good point. So any other questions on any of the items that we've shared with you tonight?
Any other questions for the superintendent?
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much.
Good seeing you. I'll see you.
I'll see you when Thursday? What day is it? Thanks.
We're gonna have policy tomorrow.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks, Todd. So we can go back to approval of the minutes. I don't know if people had a chance to review these yet.
They're pretty,
They really are.
aren't they?
They stand out.
Sorry,
Great job.
I get a little crazy.
So this was the September 8th was the water conversations, water and sewer, I believe.
Water, wastewater
Yeah,
treatment.
there was the
and pump.
police,
We had the conversation with Chief Jordan.
Chief
and then,
Jordan, then Sean. And then you just,
And,
that was it.
that was it.
I'll accept a motion on the September 8th minutes.
Make a motion? for September 8th.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. September 14th.
Riverfront Advisory Committee, library, letter. And what else?
And then
Rec
Rec.
letter.
and more pretty pages.
So I have questions, but they're not necessarily on the minutes. Like there's several that we said no to in this, and I'm wondering what the organizations, if they had a response to that.
Yes, so during budget workshop, there was I think the council voted to put the fire vehicle request back in, which will be coming up at the next meeting to go to the budget committee. So amend the budget as town manager brought it in based off CIP comments and what he proposed, and put back in, town council want to put back in the 50,000 for the,
So we're using capital reserve funding. for
it's being
leases.
proposed, so it's coming back.
I'll make a motion at the budget committee to take it back out, but
Okay,
it won't matter.
because it's just at the bottom line,
Well,
they'll do whatever
there's
they
going to be
want.
an actual
Right there.
resolution on that.
Correct.
What is the
What does
resolution?
that mean?
Tomorrow's
resolution is a
annual lease payment for fire engine 5, whereas as the annual payment for engine 5 will be paid using the fire and rescue department capital reserve account. That's second reading tonight, tomorrow.
Is that for just expending it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's not for like going into the budget, that's for taking it out to spend
Yes.
for this year's lease payment.
Yeah, which has to be done. But.
Right. All right, so I misunderstood that at the meeting then.
But then their premise is just to continue that process.
Yeah, they seem to have no concern about using capital reserves for,
Well, they must assume it's legal for them to do it. Because they're doing it.
I mean, there's only so much.
Whether it's a smart financial
Yeah.
long-term arrangement is another question.
Any other library? I know the library was in here that we.
Yeah, library, same as CIP. It's just, what, for the library, they got compensation. It was at the workshop, it had to do with compensation, not the actual, request at CIP.
Oh, yes, their biggest concern was over basically
Pay?
salary.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the former directors who left in the year 2000 says she makes 10 grand more than Carrie, the current director, does now, and the director over in Exeter makes 20 grand more.
This is outside of the purview of the capital
Yeah,
improvement.
outside- but that was the
Y'all can have that conversation at the
Yeah,
council.
that was their main topic of concern.
Yeah,
And
no.
then
Which
there
is not below us, but I just that was.
and then there was other topic, conversation of, Moonlight Brook culvert.
Yeah.
but-
Yes,
but that ended up being, I'm sorry, can we?
Oh, no, yeah, Moonlight Brook, they basically said they would take the money from, I think it was, the stormwater.
Yeah, which is what we had
Yeah.
suggested.
How about
MS4?
the improvements to the park, the whole idea of the living
Shoreline.
shoreline and
Um,
establishing.
It's going through as is.
The living shoreline, were the 75,000,
Well, we recommended establishing a
Yeah,
capital.
They have to have a whole
I think
warrant
they
to-
said that it makes more sense to take money out of some existing funds and create a brand new fund for this.
Yeah, so that's the one that's going to the warrant.
That one's going on.
So it's going on a warrant to start a new fund?
Yes.
Or- Okay, so it is. That's what we had suggested.
Correct. That's the only way forward too, I think.
So if they
Yeah, 'cause
take
there's no
the money,
fund for it.
if they take the money from the MS4 program to fix the culverts,
Mhm.
who does the work? DPW?
DPW, it's under their jurisdiction. So
Yeah.
basically what they're looking for money for is that study, the H&E hydrology study, to get the ball rolling.
Right, but there is gonna be a vote to establish a new capital reserve fund for this living shoreline improvement to the park.
Correct.
project. Yes,
Yes. Yep.
that's good.
This sheet here,
Yes.
it lists the living shoreline as necessary, and the vote here said desirable.
I can update that.
Not that it's not desirable, but
I
necessary.
understand.
Did I do it wrong, maybe?
No, your minutes are
Oh,
right. I
minutes are
remember the
right.
conversation because we had a second motion.
Okay.
The Excel thing.
Any other questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes?
Wait. Who's-
Oh, who made the motion? Sorry, I'll accept the motion. Sorry. I jumped right into.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Brian.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Jane, you're just not getting on board here.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. So voting on the school district.
Yeah.
My understanding is only one.
There's only one that where they're actually asking, two, where they're asking to raise and appropriate this year.
Right.
One is the,
SD.
50,000 that would be added to the already existing capital improvement fund that has $150,000 in it for the playground.
Right.
Let's discuss that one first.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
Is there student input on playgrounds?
So there's been a ton of work done by the PTA. Like there were several, there was the open house at the elementary school in the spring, was it? Spring?
Yeah.
Like there were several example potential ones put up there that had
Cool.
input from the community, had input from kids, had input from, so it's like had ample opportunity to have input.
Great. I was just curious about that process. Thank you.
And so it sounds like we've been committed to this for some time, raising money each year.
Yes.
right?
This is really completing the work that's been done over the last 3 years to keep appropriating the capital reserve fund.
Yep.
Any motions?
First, how would the committee like to designate it? Is it D as proposed?
I mean, it is desirable. I mean,
Just,
Makes sense.
okay.
D.
do you want to have a motion discussion on this one before we go to that what feels like the bigger conversation?
I would say just close it out, vote on it, and go to the next one.
Any other comments on the school, on the playground? Any motions?
I'll make a motion for the Newmarket Elementary School playground for 50,000? 50,000.
To recommend
To recommend for 50,000 be appropriated for.
with the priority of
For the priority of N.
I think it's D.
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 See, sorry, the other
Desirable.
one's the wrong one. Sorry, I'm getting letters confused here.
Desirable.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Okay.
So the other one is the roof and building system replacement project title, which I would say is more part of the building and facilities, not the building, the facilities maintenance capital reserve fund that has the 639K in it right now. So this is not like a new capital reserve fund. That to me falls under building and facilities. I'm sorry, not building. Building is a different capital reserve fund. Facilities maintenance capital reserve fund.
Facilities maintenance.
So there's a request for 100K. Any discussion? We started this conversation.
I'd want way more info, like I'd want to see, I think they should have a study done
Yep.
so that we know how much we should be putting away. 100 may be more than we need and it may be not enough.
Yep.
Like, who knows? So if you're going to actually look forward, which is smart and it's the right thing to do, we should do it professionally.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, just the other building systems is pretty vague. So I do, I don't know if there is a list already of that, but like that's something I would want to see for, and just for the future, it's like roof, okay, HVAC, it's just the other building systems, like, okay, what specifically other building systems need fixing and how's that fit in?
Right, a professional reserve study would explain all of that. It would lay it out, every system, everything. What its life expectancy is, how much it would cost to replace, what the assumption is.
I wonder, like, just thinking of it, would it make sense to have a reserve fund just for studies?
I mean, we'd be
Is that-
taking money out of it like every year.
I mean, is that a allowable use
I
for?
don't know, I have to look into it, but just maybe, something to discuss in the future. Like, as we go through these, as we review different departments, like how many people need studies,
Yeah.
done, does it have to be a specific purpose, or can you have a general to conduct studies?
I mean, I think this gets to like a much larger conversation than this, but one that I think we have to have over like the winter, like not like every week, but like what is our role in helping manifest the master plan through the capital improvement plan? And what does that actually look like? Because I think what we're approving right now are basically budget requests with 2-line narratives. That's not a plan. That is like we're trying to suss out via dialoguing, like bringing people in. Some people don't come in. Like what the plan is. Like actually building a plan that is linked to the master plan. The budget is just the operationalization of it. Becomes a much clearer process. That's my
No, I
gut.
agree, I agree. And I mean, I think we had talked earlier about, like, I think, I don't know, there was someone about an attorney or, no, I'm sorry, an engineer,
Right.
right? So if we had a pool for professional services, right? And it was under professional services, it could be an auditing company, right? So most times when you're going to look at a building and they're going to look at everything, the program manager, they'll take up all of the liability. They'll do all the auditing, and that's all built in to the cost. But I think to have a staff that goes back to the master plan, that kind of comes back to what we're talking about. And I don't mean adding staff to the town, but having an assigned resource as opposed to a dedicated resource that the town could pull from, like we have the town attorney.
Someone like on a retainer almost.
Exactly, yeah. But like an engineer, an auditing group, anything like that. But it's got to go tie back to what the master plan is, right? To be able to do that.
Well, that's what I'm saying, the upkeep of town facilities, I mean,
Huh?
critical facilities.
It's sort of like honestly we didn't talk about it during the town facilities
Yeah.
conversation, but like I would love the similar thing to happen there too. Like what is like the schedule of maintenance to update like
Well,
town
we're trying to
facilities?
to give town credit right now, they are a facility study. They're trying to get one done right now, so they are going through that process.
That will lead to
That will lead to this
Yeah.
is where we need upgrades. This is where maybe we need whatever.
So the school's just in a
recommendations.
different place right now, given that the buildings have just been renovated, that it's less like the study and more of like I think the reserve study around like, okay, what's the scheduled maintenance plan here?
But
Replacement line. So I am disinclined to approve with all respect to the district and to Dave, like the new facilities director, like this is just a swing at a number, and I'm not sure we should be asking taxpayers for swings.
so you're looking for a more detailed, to your point, what buildings? What are you going to look at, right?
I think that they are underway, he is underway right now of starting like internally to build this plan. I think
Right.
what we send back is a recommendation of get a like reserve study completed so that we really understand what like the schedule of maintenance needs to be, and then we can raise and appropriate accordingly.
That makes sense.
I mean, just, it sounds funny, but just a clear definition of what that means, right? A facilities renewal plan.
Yeah, I mean, like,
What is
so we
that?
know that the roof only has such a life, right? We know that the HVAC only has such a
Right.
life. And like, how are we like ticking and tying the windows, right? All of it, ticking and tying it so that it all like maps out to like a more even.
I mean, a reserve study is really intended to, through an engineering firm, to look at the facilities and develop a plan so that you know what the capital appropriation you need to set aside is each year, so that when you come to year 8 and it's time to replace the roof, the money's sitting there.
Yeah,
I'm going through this with a nonprofit I'm on the board of, and it's, if you're gonna go ask, for donations or ask for money to do this, you want a plan that makes sense to everybody. This is why we need to do it. This is truly what its, life expectancy is, or it's when somebody says to you, you had the question about the playground, something's at its expected life, the end of its expected life, like, you'd like to be sure of that, right?
Yeah.
So if you had a third-party independent engineering firm that said, this roof in year 2033 is gonna be at the end of its expected
agree.
life, like,
No, I agree.
you're gonna need to replace it.
I was on a condo board that did the same thing, like old buildings that needed to be renovated, or we needed to have an understanding of what do we need?
There's lots of good firms that do this, in this area. And there may be people who specialize in municipal school and stuff like that. Sure.
I mean, the other thing too is, we have to make sure that we have a good, guidance on is what's happening in Concord, what's happening in DC, where are there monies that we can go fight for or apply for? Offer some guidance on that too, and I think the appropriate companies have that expertise in-house too, and that should be something that we look at.
I will say from a district side, the business administrator, Jan Miller, like, unbelievable the amount of money she is pulling
Yep.
from, like, grants, like, at state, federal level, like, tracking, like, what's coming, like, she's actually, like, it would be fantastic if the town, like, and I don't know much about, like, is it Bill Tappan, the town president? Like, I just don't know anyone in the town if they have that level of, like, grant knowledge.
She's awesome. She's
Yep.
a star.
Well, I'll say a lot of the department heads, like Sean and Greg, are actually pretty good at it.
That's great.
I think, though, that's kind of a little bit outside of what we're.
That's a good point.
100%, yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I'll just add the other caveat too. There's 630K in here. I feel like if there's a real emergency,
They can do it.
there's enough money to, like, they can pull from. And then we give a year to figure out, okay, what is the actual plan?
Just point of order, do you want to extend the meeting by
yeah.
15 minutes?
Sure.
Yeah.
Don't need a motion.
Just
for
a
it.
motion, yeah.
All right, I'm going to motion to extend the meeting by 50 minutes.
I'll make a motion.
Second,
All right, all those in favor?
sorry.
Opposed?
Thank you.
4-0. All right, so
No, they're gonna pull 100 out of that 639, so it's gonna be
5:30 then. So is there, I'll take a motion.
I would make a motion. Well, is our motion a recommendation?
It
Recommendation.
would be positive, yeah.
It was, yeah.
In the
I guess
affirmative, right?
we'd have to say either we move to recommend or to not recommend.
Yeah, so it might as well be clear, so maybe the opposite of that, so. I would vote the designation, or say what the designation is in either to vote to recommend or not recommend.
Okay,
I would make a motion to not recommend based on not having an adequate, amount of information to determine whether this is the correct
Yeah.
amount of a reserve, but it's not to say that we shouldn't be doing this.
is there a second?
Second,
Discussion. Let's say we should just inform the district, and I can do this on Thursday too, but like we should inform the district that like we do want to be putting money away, and that
More
we
information.
highly encourage a reserve study. So the motion is to not recommend. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. So, other business.
I guess scheduling. For when do we want to meet again to start next year's process?
I feel like we can wait till after the new year. I don't know how people
That's
feel
what I
about
was
that.
thinking,
But it would be great just to get together in maybe like January if people are okay with that. Like I'm much like once a month kind of meetings to
Yeah.
roll
I
into.
was thinking end of January,
Okay.
if that makes sense. Yeah.
When?
End of January
End.
sometime. We could figure out the exact date, but
Okay.
that makes sense to me.
In the interim, and I know I talked to Steve about this, but like, so I think you're already doing this, but I don't know what local communities do for their capital improvement plans, but it'll be fantastic to see like maybe what some other communities have for their plans.
How about I have that for the first meeting?
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah,
That
so
would be
this is
great.
what other communities do, and we can learn from them.
That'd be awesome.
Like size,
yeah, it has to be like for like though.
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
right?
Well, yeah.
We're not Portsmouth. we're not
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah. Definitely.
Exeter. All right. We didn't need those 50 minutes. We needed 50 seconds.
702.
What are some of the comparable towns to 10,000?
Around here.
So, I mean, Exeter's a little bigger. I'm trying to, so the problem is now I've got comparable school districts in my head, which is
Yeah,
different.
yeah, that's different.
Dover, there's Dover, Durham, Newfield. I'm just listing off towns that are around us.
Maybe Newfield?
Newfield.
But
is a
population
small-
size.
Smaller.
I would probably say either Dover and Durham.
Durham might be similar.
I think,
Durham is somewhat similar, right?
They've got.
They have the unique
more
aspect
now.
of the university there, but still,
No, they have about 12 or 13,000.
okay, that's pretty close. So we're at 9.
Oh, okay.
There's quite a few towns in New Hampshire that are similar.
Epping often, I tell you what, if you look at like, I know Steve has done briefs.
Yeah.
Where he's compares us to other towns. Let's just use that list. There's
Yeah.
no reason to reinvent the
Yeah.
wheel. But like, I know Epping's on the list, Durham's
Yeah.
always on the list, but. Any other business? I just want to thank the committee for hard work. I know that I probably have been a little bit of a pain in some of this process, but appreciate the like level of rigor that we're trying to bring to this. And thank you, Bart, for like the corralling of all this.
No, and I just likewise, thank you all for this season's learning experience for me. I'm looking forward to working with you all moving forward.
Awesome.
Make this a better process.
yeah, it was
Thank
great.
you very much.
Motion adjourned?
I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. We are adjourned at 7:04.
Thank you, Sue.